International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrants Workers and Members of Their Families. Part 6. Promotion of sound, equitable, humane and lawful conditions in connection with international migration of workers and members of their families. Article 64, 1. Without prejudice to Article 79 of the present Convention. The states parties concerned shall as appropriate consult and cooperate with a view to promoting sound, equitable and humane conditions in connection with international migration of workers and members of their families. 2. In this respect, due regard shall be paid not only to labor needs and resources, but also to the social, economic, cultural and other needs of migrant workers and members of their families involved, as well as to the consequences of such migration for the communities concerned. Article 65, 1. States parties shall maintain appropriate services to deal with questions concerning international migration of workers and members of their families. Their functions shall include, inter alia, a. The formulation and implementation of policies regarding such migration. b. An exchange of information, consultation and cooperation with the competent authorities of other states parties involved in such migration. c. The provision of appropriate information, particularly to employers, workers and their organizations on policies, laws and regulations relating to migration and employment, on agreements concluded with other states concerning migration and on other relevant matters. d. The provision of information and appropriate assistance to migrant workers and members of their families regarding requisite authorizations and formalities and arrangements for departure, travel, arrival, stay, remunerated activities, exit and return, as well as on conditions of work and life in the state of employment and on customs, currency, tax and other relevant laws and regulations. 2. States parties shall facilitate as appropriate the provision of adequate consular and other services that are necessary to meet the social, cultural and other needs of migrant workers and members of their families. Article 66, 1. Subject to paragraph 2 of the present article, the right to undertake operations with a view to the recruitment of workers for employment in another state shall be restricted to a. Public services or bodies of the state in which such operations take place, b. Public services or bodies of the state of employment on the basis of agreement between the states concerned, c. A body established by virtue of a bilateral or multilateral agreement. 2. Subject to any authorization, approval and supervision by the public authorities of the states parties concerned as may be established pursuant to the legislation and practice of those states, agencies. Prospective employers or persons acting on their behalf may also be permitted to undertake the said operations. Article 67, 1. States parties concerned shall cooperate as appropriate in the adoption of measures regarding the orderly return of migrant workers and members of their families to the state of origin when they decide to return or their authorization of residence or employment expires or when they are in the state of employment in an irregular situation. 2. Concerning migrant workers and members of their families in a regular situation, states parties concerned shall cooperate as appropriate, on terms agreed upon by those states, with a view to promoting adequate economic conditions for their resettlement and to facilitating their durable social and cultural reintegration in the state of origin. Article 68, 1. States parties, including states of transit, shall collaborate with a view to preventing and eliminating illegal or clandestine movements and employment of migrant workers in an irregular situation. The measures to be taken to this end within the jurisdiction of each state concerned shall include a. Appropriate measures against the dissemination of misleading information relating to emigration and immigration. b. Measures to detect and eradicate illegal or clandestine movements of migrant workers and members of their families and to impose effective sanctions on persons, groups or entities which organize, operate or assist in organizing or operating such movements. c. Measures to impose effective sanctions on persons, groups or entities which use violence, threats or intimidation against migrant workers or members of their families in an irregular situation. 2. States of employment shall take all adequate and effective measures to eliminate employment in their territory of migrant workers in an irregular situation, including, whenever appropriate, sanctions on employers of such workers. The rights of migrant workers vis-a-vis their employer arising from employment shall not be impaired by these measures. Article 69, 1. States parties shall, when there are migrant workers and members of their families within their territory in an irregular situation, take appropriate measures to ensure that such a situation does not persist. 2. Whenever states parties concerned consider the possibility of regularizing the situation of such persons in accordance with applicable national legislation and bilateral or multilateral agreements, appropriate account shall be taken of the circumstances of their entry, the duration of their stay in the states of employment and other relevant considerations, in particular those relating to their family situation. Article 70. States parties shall take measures not less favorable than those applied to nationals to ensure that working and living conditions of migrant workers and members of their families in a regular situation are in keeping with the standards of fitness, safety, health and principles of human dignity. Article 71, 1. States parties shall facilitate, whenever necessary, the repatriation to the state of origin of the bodies of deceased migrant workers or members of their families. 2. As regards compensation matters relating to the death of a migrant worker or a member of his or her family, states parties shall, as appropriate, provide assistance to the persons concerned with a view to the prompt settlement of such matters. Settlement of these matters shall be carried out on the basis of applicable national law in accordance with the provisions of the present convention and any relevant bilateral or multilateral agreements.